Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I never expected my grandmother's 80th birthday dinner would turn into the night my family discovered I owned a $3 million penthouse in Manhattan. My sister Emma had just finished complaining about her failed engagement when she accidentally opened my social media photos while showing pictures of her latest art project. The image of my renovated living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park filled her phone screen. Her face went from casual interest to confusion to absolute rage in 3 seconds flat. She started screaming that I was hiding money while she struggled to pay rent. My father dropped his fork with a loud clang that echoed through the upscale restaurant. Then my Aunt Linda stood up and said 6 words that made everyone at our table freeze in stunned silence. Growing up as Emma's brother was like living in the shadow of a spotlight that never dimmed. From the moment she could walk, my parents treated her like their personal masterpiece. When Emma turned 5, they hired a private tutor to give her advanced reading lessons twice a week. I remember sitting at the kitchen table doing my homework while listening to her practice French pronunciation in the living room. My parents would clap and cheer at every correct word she spoke. Meanwhile, I learned multiplication tables by myself and helped with dinner preparations every night. When Emma expressed interest in ballet, my mother Patricia immediately enrolled her in the most expensive studio in town. The monthly fees cost more than our grocery budget, but watching Emma twirl across the hardwood floor brought tears of pride to my mother's eyes. I asked about joining the school wrestling team, but my father David explained that sports equipment was too costly that year. By age 7, Emma had riding lessons every Saturday morning at the Millbrook Equestrian Center. She wore custom-fitted boots and carried a leather riding crop with her initials embossed in gold letters. I walked to the public library every Saturday, checking out books about business and investment strategies that seemed far beyond my understanding at the time. The librarian, Mrs. Campbell, always smiled when I approached her desk with another stack of financial magazines. Emma's bedroom looked like a princess castle with pink wallpaper, a canopy bed, and shelves lined with collectible dolls from around the world. My room had basic furniture and posters I saved up to buy with allowance money I earned by taking out trash and folding laundry. When Emma decided she wanted to redecorate at age 10, my parents hired an interior designer and spent $4,000 transforming her space into a teen paradise. During elementary school, Emma attended Riverside Academy, a private institution with small class sizes and specialized art programs. The tuition cost $15,000 annually, not including supplies, field trips, and extracurricular activities. I went to public school and rode the bus every morning with neighborhood kids whose parents worked double shifts to make ends meet. I learned valuable lessons about friendship and resourcefulness from classmates who understood what it meant to earn everything they had. When Emma turned 13, my parents bought her a professional easel and oil painting supplies for her birthday. She'd set up in the sunroom and create abstract pieces that my mother would frame and hang throughout our house. Visitors would comment on Emma's artistic talent, while I quietly excelled in mathematics and science classes. My report cards showed straight A grades, but family dinner conversations centered on Emma's latest creative project or upcoming school performance. High school brought new expenses for Emma's education. Private art classes with a renowned local artist cost $200 per session. Photography equipment for her portfolio required another $3,000 investment. SAT prep courses, college application consultants, and summer enrichment programs consumed my parents' attention and financial resources. I worked my first job at 14 stocking shelves at Peterson's hardware store every weekday after school. Mr. Peterson taught me about inventory management, customer service, and basic business operations. My paychecks went straight into a savings account I'd opened without telling my parents. Emma spent her afternoons at the country club pool or shopping with friends whose families owned lakefront vacation homes. The pattern continued through our teenage years. Emma received a car for her 16th birthday, while I saved for 2 years to buy a used bicycle. She went to summer camps in Colorado and art workshops in California, while I picked up extra shifts at the hardware store and started a small lawn mowing business in our neighborhood. My parents praised Emma's creativity and sensitivity, while expecting me to handle responsibilities without recognition or assistance. When college applications came due, I discovered the devastating truth about our family's priorities. My parents had established education funds for both of us when we were born, but Emma's private school expenses had depleted both accounts. The money meant for my college education had been transferred to cover her riding lessons, art supplies, and enrichment programs. My father explained this to me privately in his home office, assuring me that student loans would provide excellent learning opportunities about financial responsibility. Emma's college fund remained intact, designated for the expensive art school she'd chosen in Boston. Her acceptance letter arrived with a scholarship offer covering 30% of tuition costs. My parents celebrated by taking her out for dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town. When my acceptance letter arrived from the state university with a partial academic scholarship, my mother congratulated me while sorting through bills at the kitchen counter. The night before I left for college, Emma complained that her dorm room allocation wasn't large enough for all her belongings. My parents promised to pay for off-campus housing if the dormitory experience proved unsuitable. I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and a backpack, knowing that whatever I forgot would have to wait until I could afford to replace it. Standing in my empty childhood bedroom, I realized that my parents' love came with conditions I'd never be able to meet. Emma had been born to receive their affection and support, while I'd been assigned the role of the responsible child who required less attention because he could take care of himself. That understanding hurt more than any financial sacrifice they'd asked me to make. College life hit me like ice water, but I'd been preparing for this reality since childhood. While Emma called home crying about her roommate's music being too loud, I was juggling 3 part-time jobs to supplement my partial scholarship and student loans. Monday through Wednesday, I washed dishes at Angelo's Italian restaurant from 6 until 10 in the evening. Thursday and Friday nights, I worked security at the campus library, checking student IDs and helping close the building. Weekends found me loading mulch and fertilizer at Greenfield Garden Center, learning about landscaping from customers who owned their own businesses. My dormitory roommate Marcus came from a similar background. His single mother had cleaned office buildings for 20 years to send him to college, and he understood the pressure of making every dollar count. Marcus studied business administration while I pursued finance and economics. We'd stay up late discussing investment strategies and entrepreneurial opportunities, sharing instant ramen and planning futures that seemed impossibly distant. During my sophomore year, I met Sarah at a campus job fair. She was working her way through education school by tutoring struggling students and coaching youth soccer on weekends. Sarah had grown up in a military family that moved frequently, teaching her adaptability and independence. She wore thrift store clothes with confidence and saved money for textbooks instead of spring break trips. Our first date was studying together in the library, followed by coffee at the cheapest cafe near campus. Sarah understood my family dynamics without judgment or pity. When I explained how Emma's expenses had consumed my college fund, Sarah shared her own story about choosing community college for 2 years to save money before transferring. She'd watched friends accumulate debt for social experiences while she focused on long-term goals. Meeting Sarah felt like finding someone who spoke my language of sacrifice and determination. My work schedule was relentless but educational. At Angelo's restaurant, I learned about food costs, employee management, and customer satisfaction from observing how the owner operated his business. The library security job gave me quiet hours to study while earning money, and I discovered academic resources that most students never explored. At Greenfield Garden Center, I worked alongside landscapers who owned successful companies and homeowners who'd built wealth through real estate investment. Frank Mueller, who owned a landscaping business, noticed my work ethic and attention to detail during his regular weekend visits to buy supplies. He started requesting me specifically to help load his truck, and eventually offered me additional work on Saturday mornings helping with residential projects. Frank paid cash and taught me about property values, neighborhood trends, and how curb appeal affected home prices. Working for Frank opened my eyes to real estate opportunities that I'd never considered. He explained how buying rental properties could generate passive income and build long-term wealth. Frank had started with a single duplex 20 years earlier and now owned 12 properties throughout the city. He emphasized the importance of understanding local markets, maintaining good relationships with tenants, and reinvesting profits into additional acquisitions. While I spent my junior year working 70-hour weeks between classes and jobs, Emma was studying abroad in Paris. Her Instagram posts showed museum visits, cafe lunches, and weekend trips to other European cities. My parents supplemented her study abroad stipend to ensure she could fully experience cultural opportunities. Meanwhile, I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch and walking to save bus fare. Sarah and I supported each other through the exhaustion and financial stress. She'd bring me homemade soup when I was too tired to cook, and I'd help her grade papers when she had too many tutoring clients to handle alone. We planned a future together based on shared values of hard work, fiscal responsibility, and building something meaningful rather than seeking immediate gratification. During spring break of my junior year, while Emma vacationed in Cancun, with friends I worked full-time hours at all 3 jobs and saved every extra dollar. Sarah stayed on campus too, teaching tennis lessons to local children and cleaning offices with a janitorial service. We spent our free time exploring the city on foot, finding free entertainment, and dreaming about the day when our efforts would pay off. The most painful moment came when Emma decided to visit my campus unannounced during her spring break trip. She'd convinced a boyfriend to drive her to my college for the weekend, expecting to stay in my dorm room and experience college social life. I was working at the restaurant when she arrived, so Marcus let her into our tiny shared room. When I returned at midnight, exhausted from a double shift, Emma was complaining about the uncomfortable mattress and lack of air conditioning. The next evening, Emma wanted to borrow my car to drive to a party with some students she'd met. My car was a 15-year-old Honda Civic with manual transmission and 200,000 miles on the odometer. I'd bought it for $3,000 with money saved from my jobs, and it represented freedom and independence that I'd earned through months of sacrifice. I needed the car to get to work the following morning, so I explained that she'd have to find alternative transportation. Emma convinced her boyfriend to follow her while she drove my car, promising to return it early the next morning. I reluctantly agreed, knowing that refusing would create family drama I couldn't afford. At 3 in the morning, my phone rang with news that Emma had crashed my car into a telephone pole while leaving an off-campus party. She'd been drinking and misjudged a turn in an unfamiliar area. The police report listed Emma as the driver, but she wasn't seriously injured. My car, however, was completely destroyed. The insurance adjuster determined that the vehicle's value didn't justify repair costs, so they offered me $1,200 for total loss settlement. Emma cried and apologized, promising that our parents would replace my car immediately. When I called home to explain the situation, my father's response crushed whatever faith I had left in family support. He said Emma had learned her lesson, and that involving their insurance would increase premium costs for everyone. He suggested that my insurance settlement plus the money I'd been saving should cover a replacement vehicle. If that wasn't enough, perhaps I could work extra hours for a few months to make up the difference. Emma flew home the next day, while I figured out how to get to my 3 jobs without transportation. Sarah borrowed her friend's bike for me to use until I could find a solution. I spent the next 4 months riding a bicycle 12 miles round trip to work at the garden center, walking to my restaurant job and taking buses, when weather made cycling impossible. My parents paid for Emma's lawyer when she faced charges related to the accident, but they offered no financial assistance for my transportation challenges. That experience taught me that I could only depend on myself and the few people who truly understood the value of personal responsibility. Emma returned to her Paris study abroad program, while I rebuilt my life around the reality that my family would always prioritize her needs over mine. The bicycle rides to work gave me time to think about my future and what I wanted to build for myself. I realized that proving my worth to my parents was impossible because they'd already decided who deserved their investment. Instead, I focused on proving to myself that I could succeed without their help and create the life I wanted through my own efforts. After graduation, I moved into a studio apartment that could charitably be described as barely habitable. The building was in a transitional neighborhood where police sirens provided nightly background music, and the closest grocery store sold expired produce at premium prices. My apartment was on the 4th floor of a walk-up building with no elevator, no air conditioning, and radiator heat that barely functioned during winter months. The previous tenant had left behind evidence of a serious mouse problem and water damage that the landlord promised to address eventually. I furnished my new home with pieces found at estate sales and thrift stores. A folding table served as both dining room and office space. My mattress sat directly on the floor until I could afford a bed frame. The refrigerator was older than I was and made concerning noises that suggested imminent failure. But it was mine, and every piece of furniture represented independence that I'd earned through years of sacrifice. My first job was as a junior analyst at Hartwell Investment Management, a small firm that specialized in pension fund administration and municipal bond portfolios. The salary was modest, but included health insurance and opportunities for advancement based on performance rather than connections. Jennifer Walsh, the senior partner, had built the firm from nothing after working for larger companies that didn't appreciate her analytical skills or innovative approaches to client service. Jennifer became my mentor and advocate during those early months when I was learning the complexities of institutional investing. She noticed that I arrived early, stayed late, and approached every assignment with thorough research and creative problem-solving. While other junior employees complained about tedious data entry tasks, I saw opportunities to identify patterns and inefficiencies that could improve client outcomes. The work suited my methodical personality and mathematical background. Analyzing pension fund performance required attention to detail, understanding of long-term market trends, and ability to communicate complex information clearly to trustees who made funding decisions. I discovered that my years of working multiple jobs had taught me time management skills and stress tolerance that my colleagues lacked. Meanwhile, Emma had moved back into her childhood bedroom after graduating from art school with a degree in studio arts and $20,000 in student loan debt that my parents were helping her manage. She'd converted the basement into an art studio and started a blog about contemporary artists and gallery openings. Her posts received dozens of likes from friends and family members, which my parents interpreted as evidence of her professional potential. Family dinners became showcases for Emma's latest projects and ambitious plans. She'd describe her networking efforts with gallery owners, her ideas for collaborative exhibitions, and her vision for establishing herself as both an artist and curator. My parents listened with rapt attention and offered financial support for her portfolio development website, design, and professional photography of her artwork. When the conversation turned to my work, I'd mention client meetings or market analysis projects, but my parents' eyes would glaze over with polite disinterest. Finance seemed boring and impersonal compared to Emma's creative pursuits. My father would sometimes ask if I could help fund Emma's next gallery showing since I had a steady paycheck, and she was still building her career. Jennifer recognized my potential and started giving me more complex assignments. I worked on a pension fund restructuring project that involved analyzing decades of investment data and proposing portfolio changes to improve long-term returns. The project required months of research and modeling, but my recommendations resulted in improved funding ratios and reduced administrative costs. The client was so pleased that they referred 2 additional pension funds to our firm. My success with institutional clients led to a substantial bonus that I used to make my first real estate investment. Marcus had moved to Chicago after graduation, but we stayed in touch and shared information about investment opportunities. He'd started buying small, multi-family properties in neighborhoods, showing signs of revitalization. Following his example, I researched local real estate markets and identified a duplex in an area where young professionals were starting to rent apartments. The duplex was a foreclosure property that needed cosmetic improvements, but had solid structural bones. I used my bonus as a down payment and spent weekends painting walls, refinishing hardwood floors, and updating bathroom fixtures. YouTube videos and library books taught me basic plumbing and electrical work. Frank Muller, my former boss from the garden center, helped me understand permit requirements and recommended reliable contractors for major repairs. Within 6 months, I had both units rented to graduate students who appreciated the renovated space and convenient location. The rental income covered my mortgage payment, plus a small monthly profit that I immediately saved for future investments. Seeing my first property generating passive income felt more satisfying than any family dinner praise I'd ever received. Emma, meanwhile, had started dating Brandon Whitfield, whose family owned a chain of luxury car dealerships throughout New England. Brandon had graduated from an Ivy League school with a business degree he'd never used, preferring to travel and invest in art collections. He wore designer clothes casually and drove different sports cars depending on his mood. My parents were immediately charmed by his sophistication and generous personality. Brandon treated Emma like the princess she'd always been, taking her to expensive restaurants, Broadway shows, and weekend trips to his family's vacation home in the Hamptons. He talked about funding her art career and possibly opening a gallery together where she could showcase her work alongside pieces from his collection. Emma blossomed under his attention and financial support, creating more artwork than she'd produced since college. During family gatherings, Brandon dominated conversations with stories about art, auctions, wine tastings, and cultural events that seemed impossibly glamorous. My parents asked detailed questions about his family business and investment strategies, while treating him like the son they'd always wanted. When I mentioned my real estate investment or client successes, the conversation would quickly return to Brandon's latest acquisition or Emma's artistic development. Sarah had finished her education degree and found a teaching position at an elementary school in a diverse neighborhood where many students qualified for free lunch programs. She threw herself into creating engaging lesson plans and organizing after-school tutoring sessions for struggling readers. Her dedication to helping disadvantaged children reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her practical compassion and selfless work ethic. Our relationship deepened as we supported each other's professional growth and shared dreams for the future. Sarah understood my drive to build financial security, and I respected her commitment to making a difference in children's lives. We talked about marriage, homeownership, and starting a family based on values we'd learned through overcoming challenges rather than expecting things to be handed to us. The contrast between my relationship with Sarah and Emma's relationship with Brandon became more apparent during family events. Brandon showered Emma with expensive gifts and elaborate gestures, while Sarah and I showed love through practical support and shared goals. My parents clearly preferred Brandon's flashy demonstrations of affection over the quiet stability that Sarah and I had built together. One evening, my father pulled me aside after a family dinner and suggested that I should learn from Brandon's approach to treating women. He pointed out that Emma seemed happier than she'd ever been, and that successful men know how to make grand romantic gestures. The implication that I was somehow failing Sarah because I couldn't afford luxury vacations or designer jewelry stung more than I'd expected. That conversation motivated me to work even harder on building long-term wealth rather than seeking short-term approval. I researched additional real estate opportunities and started looking at properties in emerging neighborhoods where young professionals were beginning to move. My goal was to create enough passive income to support the kind of life Sarah deserved, built on a foundation of actual assets rather than family money or inherited privilege. Jennifer promoted me to senior analyst and increased my compensation significantly after my second year with the firm. She also started including me in business development meetings, where I could learn about client relations and firm management. My analytical skills and conservative approach to risk management impressed pension fund trustees who were tired of advisors who promised unrealistic returns. The promotion came with new responsibilities and opportunities to work directly with high net worth individuals who were planning for retirement or managing inheritance wealth. These clients taught me about sophisticated investment strategies, tax planning, and estate management that I'd never encountered in my working-class background. I absorbed every lesson and applied new knowledge to my own growing portfolio. By my third year at Hartwell Investment Management, I owned 3 rental properties and had accumulated more liquid savings than my parents had managed in their entire careers. But my family remained focused on Emma's artistic pursuits and her relationship with Brandon, seemingly unaware that their overlooked son had quietly become more financially successful than anyone else in the room. The irony wasn't lost on me that my parents worried about my future while celebrating Emma's dependence on someone else's wealth. They saw Brandon's money as security for their daughter, while viewing my earned income as adequate but unremarkable. I realized that they would never understand the satisfaction of building something from nothing because they'd never been forced to do it themselves. 3 years into my career at Hartwell Investment Management, my life looked completely different from the struggling college graduate who'd moved into a mouse-infested studio apartment. I now owned 6 rental properties scattered across 3 neighborhoods that showed consistent appreciation potential. My portfolio included 2 duplexes, a triplex, and a single-family home that I'd subdivided into apartments for young professionals who valued updated kitchens and reliable maintenance services. Each property acquisition had been methodical and strategic. I researched neighborhood crime statistics, school district ratings, public transportation access, and planned development projects before making offers. My background in data analysis helped me identify properties that other investors overlooked because they needed cosmetic improvements or were located in transitional areas where values were trending upward. The renovation work had become my weekend hobby and stress relief from the demanding analytical work at the investment firm. I'd learned advanced carpentry skills from YouTube tutorials and developed relationships with electricians, plumbers, and contractors who gave me fair prices because I provided consistent work and paid promptly. My properties had waiting lists of potential tenants because I treated them with respect and maintained the buildings properly. Jennifer Walsh had promoted me to senior analyst with a 6-figure salary and profit-sharing opportunities that reflected my contribution to the firm's growth. My client portfolio included municipal pension funds, university endowments, and private family foundations that appreciated my conservative approach and thorough research. Several clients had specifically requested to work with me after hearing about my performance from other trustees. The financial success felt surreal compared to my childhood of hand-me-down clothes and empty college funds, but I maintained the same modest lifestyle that had gotten me to this point. I still drove my reliable Honda Civic and lived in a simple apartment, choosing to reinvest every spare dollar into additional real estate opportunities. My goal was building generational wealth rather than impressing people with expensive possessions. Sarah and I had been engaged for 8 months and were planning a simple wedding for the following spring. She'd been promoted to vice principal at her elementary school and had started a reading intervention program that was showing remarkable success with struggling students. Her practical approach to solving problems and genuine care for children's development reminded me daily why I wanted to build a life with her. We'd found a house in a neighborhood that was perfect for starting a family. The property needed minor updates but had character and potential that we both recognized. I planned to buy it as our primary residence while keeping my rental properties as investment vehicles. Sarah was excited about having space for a garden and workshop where she could create educational materials for her students. Emma's life had taken a dramatic turn when Brandon announced he needed to take a break from their relationship to focus on his family's business expansion. She'd returned from what was supposed to be a romantic weekend in Napa Valley early, and in tears explaining that Brandon felt pressured by his father to date someone from their social circle. The breakup had devastated Emma, who'd become accustomed to Brandon's financial support and lavish lifestyle. My parents rallied around Emma during her heartbreak, offering emotional support and practical assistance. They helped her apply for teaching positions at private schools, where her art background and cultured personality would be appreciated. When those applications didn't result in immediate offers, they suggested she take time to heal and perhaps travel to Italy to study Renaissance art techniques that could enhance her portfolio. Emma embraced the idea of an educational trip to Europe with enthusiasm that surprised everyone. She researched art history programs in Florence and Rome, contacted galleries about internship opportunities, and planned an itinerary that would allow her to study master paintings in their original settings. The trip would cost $15,000, including flights, accommodations, museum fees, and living expenses for 2 months. My parents didn't hesitate to fund Emma's artistic journey to Italy. They refinanced their house to access home equity and presented the trip as an investment in her professional development. Emma would stay in pensiones near major museums, take private lessons from local artists, and document her studies through a blog that could lead to future writing opportunities. The night before Emma's departure, my family gathered for a farewell dinner at her favorite restaurant. She talked excitedly about visiting the Uffizi Gallery, studying fresco techniques in Tuscan hill towns, and potentially exhibiting work inspired by her European experience. My parents glowed with pride as they described their daughter's artistic pilgrimage to friends and relatives who joined us for the celebration. During the dinner, my father asked if I could contribute to Emma's travel fund as a gesture of sibling support. He explained that the trip represented a crucial career opportunity that could establish Emma as a serious artist with international perspective. My success in finance meant I could afford to help family members pursue their dreams, and supporting Emma would demonstrate the family solidarity that had always been our strength. I agreed to contribute $3,000 toward Emma's trip, knowing that refusing would create tension that wasn't worth the money involved. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, understanding that this financial expectation was another example of my family's assumptions about my role as the responsible provider who helped fund Emma's adventures. While Emma was documenting her artistic awakening in Italian museums, I closed on the most significant property acquisition of my investment career. A luxury penthouse in Manhattan had become available below market value because of a messy divorce settlement that required immediate liquidation. The property represented everything I'd worked toward since college prime location, stunning views, and potential for substantial appreciation. The penthouse was located in a building that was undergoing extensive renovation and modernization. The surrounding neighborhood was experiencing rapid gentrification as young professionals discovered its convenient subway access and proximity to financial district offices. My research indicated that comparable units were selling for 20% more than the asking price, making this acquisition both a great investment and potential personal residence. Negotiating the purchase required every financial resource I'd accumulated, plus a bridge loan secured by my rental property portfolio. I liquidated my stock investments, used all my savings, and structured a complex financing arrangement that would allow me to complete the transaction within the seller's timeline requirements. The risk was substantial, but my analysis showed that the property would generate enough rental income to cover carrying costs while appreciating significantly. I managed the entire purchase process privately, working with attorneys and lenders without mentioning the transaction to anyone except Sarah. My family was focused on Emma's European adventure and didn't notice that I was handling the most complex financial deal of my life. The secrecy wasn't intentional deception, but rather a reflection of how little attention my family paid to my professional accomplishments. Emma's trip to Italy lasted 3 months instead of 2, because she'd connected with Marco, a local artist who offered to teach her traditional painting techniques in exchange for English conversation lessons. Their relationship developed quickly, and Emma extended her stay to explore both artistic collaboration and romantic possibilities. She documented their experiences through social media posts that showed museum visits, countryside painting sessions, and intimate dinners in candlelit restaurants. My parents were thrilled about Emma's artistic and personal growth during her Italian experience. They video called her weekly to hear about her progress with oil painting techniques, her improved Italian language skills, and her deepening relationship with Marco. Emma glowed with happiness as she described Marco's talent, his family's acceptance of their relationship, and their plans for collaborative exhibitions. The romance moved quickly from artistic partnership to serious commitment. Marco proposed during a sunset painting session overlooking the Tuscan countryside, and Emma accepted with tears of joy streaming down her face. She called home immediately to share the news and began planning an elaborate wedding that would celebrate both their artistic connection and Italian cultural traditions. My parents embraced Marco's sight unseen, trusting Emma's judgment, and excited about the international dimension he would bring to their family. They started researching Italian wedding customs, learning basic Italian phrases, and planning trips to meet Marco's family in preparation for the ceremony. Emma's happiness seemed to validate their investment in her artistic development and European adventure. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me as I completed renovations on my Manhattan penthouse, while my family celebrated Emma's engagement to someone she'd known for 3 months. I was quietly building substantial wealth through careful planning and strategic investments, while they focused on Emma's romantic fairy tale that depended entirely on someone else's financial support. Sarah and I visited the penthouse together for the first time on a cold Saturday morning in December. Standing in the empty living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, I felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with impressing my family or seeking their approval. This property represented years of sacrifice, disciplined saving, and calculated risks that had paid off exactly as I'd planned. Sarah understood the significance of what I'd achieved without needing explanation or validation from others. She walked through each room, envisioning how we might use the space and discussing practical considerations about maintenance and security. Her excitement was based on shared goals and mutual respect, rather than the material luxury that impressed other people. We spent the afternoon measuring rooms and planning renovations that would transform the penthouse into our dream home. Sarah suggested converting one bedroom into a home office, where I could manage my real estate portfolio, while another could become her workspace for developing educational materials. The kitchen needed updating, but the bones of the space were perfect for entertaining friends who shared our values and interests. That evening, Emma called home with devastating news that shattered her Italian fairy tale and sent shockwaves through our family's assumptions about her perfect romantic future. The penthouse purchase represented the culmination of everything I'd learned about real estate investment financial analysis and strategic risk-taking since my college days working at the Garden Center. The property was a corner unit on the 42nd floor of a pre-war building that had been completely modernized with luxury amenities while maintaining its architectural character. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided unobstructed views of Central Park to the west and the East River to the south. The seller was Rebecca Morrison, a prominent attorney whose divorce settlement required immediate liquidation of all jointly owned assets. Her ex-husband had been fighting the property valuation, causing delays that made Rebecca desperate to close quickly, even if it meant accepting below-market offers. I learned about the opportunity through Jennifer Walsh, whose client network included family law attorneys who occasionally knew about distressed luxury sales. My initial offer was rejected as too low, but Rebecca's attorney called back within a week, asking if I could close within 30 days. The compressed timeline eliminated most potential buyers who needed mortgage approval or complex financing arrangements. I structured an all-cash offer using my property portfolio as collateral for a bridge loan, demonstrating serious commitment and financial capability that impressed Rebecca's legal team. The due diligence process revealed that Rebecca had invested over $200,000 in renovations during the past 2 years. Custom millwork, imported stone countertops, and high-end appliances had transformed the space into a showcase that belonged in architectural magazines. Her loss became my gain when divorce proceedings forced her to sell before recovering her improvement costs. Closing day felt surreal as I signed documents transferring ownership of a $3 million Manhattan penthouse to my name. The attorney handling the transaction commented that he rarely saw such young buyers with sufficient cash to avoid mortgage contingencies. I explained my real estate investment background without mentioning that my family had no idea about my financial success or this major acquisition. The first month of ownership was spent planning renovations that would personalize the space while maintaining its luxury character. I hired Antonio Restrepo, a contractor I'd worked with on several rental properties, to oversee electrical updates and custom-built storage solutions. Antonio's crew appreciated working on a high-end project where budget constraints wouldn't force compromises on material quality or craftsmanship. Sarah helped select paint colors, lighting fixtures, and furniture arrangements that reflected our shared aesthetic preferences, rather than trying to impress visitors with expensive brands. We chose warm colors that made the large space feel inviting and functional furniture that prioritized comfort over status. The master bedroom became a serene retreat with blackout curtains and a reading nook where Sarah could grade papers while enjoying the city views. Meanwhile, Emma's wedding planning consumed my parents' attention and financial resources as they prepared for what promised to be an elaborate celebration of artistic love and cultural fusion. Marco had proposed during a painting session in the Tuscan countryside, and Emma wanted their wedding to reflect both her artistic sensibilities and his Italian heritage. The ceremony would take place at a historic villa outside Florence, with reception celebrations lasting 3 days. My parents mortgaged their house again to fund Emma's dream wedding, viewing the expense as an investment in her happiness and cultural education. They hired a wedding planner who specialized in international celebrations and began learning Italian phrases to communicate with Marco's extended family. Emma's dress alone cost more than most people's annual salaries, but my parents considered it appropriate for such a significant life event. Jennifer Walsh offered me a partnership track position at Hartwell Investment Management after my success with several major client acquisitions and retention projects. The promotion included equity ownership profit sharing and opportunities to develop my own client relationships within the firm's expanding institutional business. My conservative investment philosophy and thorough analytical approach had earned respect from pension fund trustees who valued long-term thinking over flashy performance claims. The new position required occasional travel to meet with prospective clients and speak at industry conferences about municipal bond analysis and pension fund management. These professional opportunities exposed me to sophisticated wealth management strategies used by institutional investors and ultra-high net worth families. I applied these techniques to my own portfolio, implementing tax planning structures and diversification strategies that optimized returns while managing risk. Sarah's career was flourishing as she developed innovative reading programs that were being adopted by other schools in her district. Her success with struggling students had attracted attention from educational researchers who wanted to study her methods and potentially scale them to help children throughout the state. She was invited to present her findings at education conferences and collaborate with university professors on academic papers. Our relationship had evolved into a true partnership based on mutual respect, shared goals, and complementary strengths. Sarah's practical wisdom and emotional intelligence balanced my analytical nature and long-term planning focus. We discussed marriage timing, family planning, and financial goals with the kind of honest communication that builds lasting relationships rather than romantic fantasies. I planned to propose to Sarah at the penthouse during a surprise dinner that would celebrate both our engagement and the completion of the renovation project. The timing felt perfect as we were both established in our careers and ready to start the next chapter of our lives together. The proposal would be private and meaningful rather than designed for social media documentation or family approval. Emma's wedding preparations hit a devastating snag when she discovered Marco had been maintaining a relationship with another woman in Rome throughout their entire courtship. The revelation came through social media posts that Emma stumbled across while researching venues for their reception celebration. Photos showed Marco with Juliana, described as his longtime girlfriend, at intimate dinners and romantic getaways during the same period he was supposedly committed to Emma. The confrontation between Emma and Marco revealed that he'd viewed their relationship as a temporary diversion rather than serious commitment leading to marriage. Marco's family had never intended to accept Emma as a permanent addition to their social circle, and his marriage proposal had been impulsive rather than carefully considered. The cultural differences that Emma had found charming were actually indicators that she'd misunderstood the relationship's significance. Emma returned from Italy heartbroken and humiliated, having invested months in a romance that existed primarily in her imagination. My parents welcomed her home with sympathy and support, but they'd already spent significant money on wedding preparations that couldn't be recovered. The deposits for venues, photographers, and catering services were lost along with Emma's confidence in her judgment and artistic direction. My father privately asked if I could help cover some of Emma's therapy expenses and living costs, while she recovered from the emotional trauma of her failed engagement. He explained that Emma needed professional support to process the betrayal and cultural misunderstanding that had shattered her dreams of artistic romance in Italy. Supporting her healing process was a family responsibility that we should share according to our individual capabilities. I agreed to contribute to Emma's therapy costs, understanding that refusing would create family conflict during an already difficult period. Sarah supported my decision, while privately observing that my parents' approach to Emma's problems consistently involved financial solutions rather than encouraging personal accountability. The pattern of rescuing Emma from consequences reinforced her dependence rather than developing resilience or self-sufficiency. The therapy sessions helped Emma recognize that her relationship with Marco had been built on idealized fantasies rather than realistic understanding of cultural differences and personal compatibility. She'd projected her romantic dreams onto someone who had different expectations and intentions from the beginning. Learning to distinguish between genuine connection and wishful thinking became an important part of her emotional growth. As Emma worked through her disappointment with professional help that I was funding, I completed the final renovations on my Manhattan penthouse and prepared to propose to Sarah in the space that represented everything I'd built through years of disciplined effort and strategic thinking. The contrast between Emma's dependence on others for emotional and financial support and my self-created success highlighted the different paths our lives had taken since childhood. The evening I planned to propose Emma was scheduled to make her first public appearance since returning from Italy at our grandmother's 80th birthday celebration. The family dinner would provide an opportunity for everyone to support Emma's recovery while celebrating Grandmother Helen's milestone birthday. None of them had any idea that the evening would explode their assumptions about family dynamics and financial success in ways that would change everything forever. Grandmother Helen's 80th birthday dinner was held at the Wellington, an upscale restaurant known for its intimate atmosphere and traditional American cuisine. 3 generations of our family gathered around a large round table decorated with white roses and flickering candles that cast warm light across the crisp linen tablecloth. The private dining room overlooked the city's historic district, where 19th-century buildings had been carefully preserved amid modern development. My parents arrived early to ensure everything was perfect for Grandmother Helen, who wore a navy blue dress with pearl jewelry that had belonged to her mother. Uncle James and Aunt Linda drove down from Boston for the celebration, bringing photo albums and family memorabilia that sparked nostalgic conversations about relatives who were no longer with us. The mood was festive, but tinged with the bittersweet awareness that these multi-generational gatherings were becoming increasingly precious. Emma arrived wearing a black designer dress that accentuated her dramatic weight loss since returning from Italy. Her breakup with Marco had affected her appetite and sleep patterns, but therapy was helping her process the emotional trauma of discovering his deception. She'd styled her hair in an elegant updo and applied makeup carefully to conceal the dark circles under her eyes that betrayed her ongoing struggle with depression. Sarah and I arrived together having spent the afternoon finalizing details for our engagement celebration the following weekend. Sarah wore a simple blue dress that complemented her natural beauty and unpretentious personality. She carried a wrapped gift for Grandmother Helen and homemade cookies that she'd baked using a recipe passed down through her military family's traditions. The dinner began with toasts celebrating Grandmother Helen's life wisdom and influence on our family's values and character. Uncle James shared stories about her resilience during the Great Depression, when she'd managed household finances and raised 4 children, while Grandfather worked multiple jobs to keep their family fed and housed. Aunt Linda described Helen's volunteer work with veterans' families and her decades of community service that had touched countless lives. Emma seemed to be emerging from her post-breakup depression as the evening progressed. She laughed at Uncle James's childhood stories and contributed her own memories of learning to paint watercolors during summer visits to Grandmother Helen's house. The artistic skills that had defined Emma's identity were rooted in those early afternoons when Helen taught her to see beauty in simple subjects like garden flowers and kitchen still life arrangements. As we finished the main course, Emma pulled out her phone to show family photos from her art projects and travels. She'd documented her European experience extensively and wanted to share images that captured the cultural richness of her Italian adventure, even though the romantic aspect had ended painfully. Her enthusiasm for art history and visual storytelling remained strong despite Marco's betrayal. Scrolling through her photo albums to find pictures from a recent gallery opening, Emma accidentally opened my social media account that was still logged in from when I'd borrowed her phone earlier to call the restaurant about our reservation time. The screen filled with images from my penthouse renovation project, showing the spacious living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, and the custom kitchen with imported granite countertops. Emma stared at the phone screen with confusion, initially assuming these were photos of a client's property that I was helping to sell or manage. The luxury finishes and Manhattan views seemed impossibly expensive for someone in my profession, and she couldn't understand why I would have taken such detailed documentation photos. She showed the images to Sarah, asking if we'd been helping wealthy clients with their real estate investments. The table conversation continued around us as Emma studied the photos more carefully, noticing personal details that suggested these weren't professional property listings. Books on financial analysis were visible on built-in shelving, and the furniture arrangements looked permanent rather than staged for potential buyers. A framed photo of Sarah and me was visible on the kitchen counter, which wouldn't make sense in a client's home. Emma's voice cut through the family conversation like breaking glass when she suddenly demanded to know why I had photos of someone's luxury penthouse on my phone. The table fell silent as everyone turned to look at her shocked expression and the phone screen she was holding up for everyone to see. Grandmother Helen asked what was wrong, and Emma stammered that she'd found pictures of an expensive apartment that didn't make any sense. My father leaned over to look at the phone display, his face transforming from mild curiosity to complete bewilderment as he registered the implications of what he was seeing. The fork in his hand dropped onto his plate with a metallic clang that seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet dining room. Uncle James and Aunt Linda exchanged confused glances while Sarah reached for my hand under the table. I realized there was no way to avoid the conversation that would inevitably follow Emma's discovery. My family deserved an explanation, even though I'd never intended for my real estate success to become a topic of public discussion. I took a deep breath and quietly confirmed that the penthouse was mine, purchased 6 months earlier as an investment and potential future residence. Emma's reaction was immediate and volcanic. She began screaming that I'd been hiding money while she struggled to pay student loans and rebuild her life after Marco's betrayal. Her voice carried throughout the restaurant as she accused me of being selfish and secretive of allowing her to worry about finances while I lived in luxury that I'd never shared with family members who needed help. The other diners in the restaurant turned to stare at our table as Emma's emotional outburst intensified. She stood up from her chair, gesturing wildly as she demanded to know how much money I'd been hiding and why I'd never offered to help with her wedding expenses or European travel costs. Her face was flushed red with anger, and tears streamed down her cheeks as years of entitlement and financial dependence exploded into public rage. My father sat frozen in stunned silence, apparently unable to process the revelation that his overlooked son had achieved financial success that exceeded anything he'd accomplished in his own career. The man who'd spent decades funding Emma's dreams while expecting me to handle my own expenses couldn't reconcile my modest lifestyle with ownership of a multi-million-dollar Manhattan property. Aunt Linda had remained quiet during Emma's outburst, but she slowly stood up from her chair and fixed Emma with a steady gaze that commanded attention from everyone at the table. Her voice was calm, but carried the authority of someone who'd watched family dynamics for decades while keeping her own counsel about what she'd observed. The words that came out of Aunt Linda's mouth changed everything we thought we knew about family finances and personal responsibility. She announced that she'd always been aware of my real estate success because she worked at the bank that processed my commercial loans and property acquisitions. More importantly, she'd known for years that I'd been quietly providing financial support to family members who had no idea where their help was actually coming from. The revelation that I'd been secretly funding Emma's therapy, contributing to my parents' mortgage payments during my father's business downturns, and providing emergency assistance during medical crises without taking credit or seeking recognition left the entire table speechless. Aunt Linda's words hung in the air like an accusation against everyone who'd underestimated my character, while overestimating Emma's needs. The silence that followed Aunt Linda's revelation stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds. Emma's angry tears had stopped flowing, replaced by a dawning awareness that her outburst had exposed ugly truths about entitlement and family assumptions that went far deeper than financial success or real estate ownership. The other diners had returned to their own conversations, but our table remained frozen in a moment of collective realization. I finally broke the silence by explaining my perspective on family responsibility and the different paths Emma and I had chosen since childhood. I spoke quietly but clearly about growing up in her shadow, watching my college fund get transferred to cover her private school expenses, and learning that love in our family came with conditions that I could never meet. My voice remained steady as I described years of working multiple jobs while she received unlimited financial support for dreams that changed with her moods. Emma listened without interrupting as I continued explaining how her crashed car incident had taught me that I could only depend on myself and the few people who truly understood personal responsibility. I described the satisfaction of building wealth through strategic planning and disciplined sacrifice, contrasting that with her expectation that someone else would always provide whatever she needed to pursue her latest passion. My father attempted to defend their parenting decisions by explaining that Emma had seemed more fragile and artistic, while I appeared naturally capable of handling challenges independently. He recognized now that their assumptions had been unfair, but they'd genuinely believed they were supporting their children according to their individual needs and temperaments. I acknowledged their intentions while pointing out the practical results of their favoritism. Emma had learned to expect rescue from consequences, while I'd learned to solve problems through my own efforts. Their approach had prepared us for completely different adult experiences, and the outcomes reflected those different expectations and skill sets. Emma surprised everyone by apologizing for her public outburst and acknowledging that she'd never considered how her privileged treatment had affected my opportunities and self-esteem. The therapy sessions following her breakup with Marco had helped her recognize patterns of self-centeredness and unrealistic expectations that had shaped her relationships with family members and romantic partners. She admitted feeling jealous of my success, but also terrified by the idea of taking complete responsibility for her own life. Marco's betrayal had forced her to confront the reality that depending on others for financial security and emotional validation left her vulnerable to disappointment and manipulation. Learning to support herself would require developing skills and confidence that she'd never been forced to build. Sarah spoke up for the first time during the evening, offering perspective from someone who'd grown up with military parents who expected self-sufficiency and personal accountability from an early age. She explained how my work ethic and financial discipline had attracted her because they demonstrated character traits that would make him a reliable partner and father. Aunt Linda revealed additional details about my quiet financial assistance to family members, including emergency funds I'd provided when my father's business faced cash flow problems and medical expense help, when my mother needed dental work that wasn't covered by insurance. I'd structured these contributions as anonymous gifts through her bank to avoid creating obligation or awkwardness during family gatherings. Grandmother Helen, who'd remained quiet during the emotional revelations, finally spoke with the wisdom of someone who'd observed 8 decades of human behavior. She pointed out that both Emma and I had inherited family traits that could be strengths or weaknesses, depending on how we chose to develop them. Emma's artistic sensitivity could become genuine creativity or remain self-indulgent fantasy. My analytical nature could build lasting success or become cold calculation that missed life's emotional richness. The conversation that followed was the most honest discussion our family had ever shared about money expectations and personal responsibility. Emma expressed genuine interest in learning business skills that could help her support herself while continuing artistic pursuits as a hobby rather than expecting them to provide her primary income. She asked if I would consider teaching her about real estate investment and property management. My parents acknowledged that their different treatment of Emma and me had created problems for both of us. Emma had never learned self-reliance, while I'd learned not to expect family support even when I deserved recognition for my achievements. They committed to family therapy sessions that could help them understand how unconscious favoritism had damaged relationships they wanted to repair. I offered Emma a position managing my rental properties, starting with basic administrative tasks and tenant relations, while she learned about maintenance marketing and financial planning. The job would provide steady income while teaching practical skills that could lead to her own real estate investments in the future. She would need to prove her reliability and work ethic, but I was willing to give her the opportunity to develop professional competence. Sarah suggested that Emma could use her artistic background for property staging and marketing materials, creating visual presentations that would help attract quality tenants and justify premium rental rates. Combining artistic skills with business knowledge could make her uniquely valuable in the real estate industry, while providing creative outlet within a profitable framework. Over the following months, Emma threw herself into learning property management with the same intensity she'd once applied to art projects. She took evening courses in business administration and real estate law, while working with my tenants and contractors during the day. Her artistic eye proved valuable for identifying cost-effective improvements that enhanced property appeal and rental value. My parents began treating me as an equal adult, rather than the responsible child who required less attention than his dramatic sister. They asked my advice about their own financial planning and retirement preparation, finally recognizing that my professional expertise could benefit the entire family. Their newfound respect felt better than any childhood recognition I'd missed. Emma's transformation was remarkable, as she discovered talents for problem-solving and customer service that she'd never known she possessed. Managing tenant relations required diplomacy and creativity that utilized her interpersonal skills within a structured business framework. She started college courses in accounting and property law building knowledge that would support independent success. 6 months after Grandmother Helen's birthday dinner, Sarah and I were married in my penthouse with a small ceremony that focused on our commitment rather than expensive displays of wealth. Emma helped with decorations and planning, contributing artistic touches that made the celebration beautiful while staying within our modest budget preferences. Emma had moved into her own apartment using income from property management work and was dating someone she'd met in her business classes, rather than seeking another romantic fantasy. Her new relationship was based on shared goals and mutual respect, rather than financial dependence or artistic pretensions. My parents sold their oversized house and moved into one of my renovated rental properties, reducing their living expenses while providing me with tenants I could trust completely. The arrangement benefited everyone while symbolizing healthier family dynamics based on mutual support rather than one-sided sacrifice. The most important lesson I learned was that success isn't about proving yourself to people who've already decided you're not worth their investment. Building the life you want requires focusing on your own values and goals rather than seeking approval from those who will never appreciate your efforts. Family relationships improve when they're based on mutual respect and realistic expectations rather than childhood roles that no longer serve anyone. Emma learned that depending on others for security and validation leaves you vulnerable to disappointment and manipulation. Developing your own capabilities and earning your own success provides confidence and freedom that no amount of financial support can replace. Real love supports growth and independence rather than enabling dependence and entitlement. My parents learned that treating children differently based on assumptions about their needs and capabilities can damage both the favored and overlooked child. Fair doesn't always mean equal, but every family member deserves respect, recognition, and opportunities to develop their potential without predetermined limitations. Today, Emma manages 12 properties in my portfolio and has started acquiring her own rental units using knowledge and capital she's earned through professional competence. She still creates art, but as personal expression, rather than expecting it to provide her primary income. Her relationship with money has transformed from entitlement to empowerment through earned success. Sarah and I have 2 children who are learning about work ethic, personal responsibility, and treating people with respect regardless of their job title or family background. We're building generational wealth while teaching our kids that character matters more than possessions, and that true security comes from developing capabilities rather than depending on others. The family dynamics that once centered on Emma's needs and my parents' assumptions have evolved into genuine relationships based on who we actually are, rather than childhood roles that limited everyone's growth. We still gather for holidays and birthdays, but the conversations now include mutual respect and shared wisdom rather than one-sided support for unrealistic expectations. Have you ever been the overlooked family member who quietly achieved success while everyone focused on someone else's drama? How did you handle the moment when your hidden accomplishments finally came to light? Share your story in the comments below, because your experience might help someone else who's building their own success without recognition. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more tales about overcoming family favoritism and building success through personal effort. Share this story with anyone who needs encouragement to keep working toward their goals even when their family doesn't notice their progress. Thank you for listening to my family's journey from dysfunction to mutual respect and healthier relationships. I hope our experience encourages you to value your own efforts and build the life you want, regardless of other people's expectations or assumptions about your potential.